You know, it's funny. I never had nightmares about dinosaurs until I got online. At the end of the movie The Lost World Jurassic Park, there's a sequence where the T-Rex runs amok in San Diego, causing chaos. It's, fun in the same way a kaiju action scene is fun. But it's not scary. It took a while for it to become scary. User Chronotican, using nothing more than the free software Blender, turned this innocent, fun sequence into the stuff of nightmares with a few alterations. From there, people online started to make more and more of these little fan films, taking familiar elements from Jurassic Park and its iterations and turning them into the stuff of nightmares, with a few simple changes. Very soon, Jurassic Park became associated more with horror than action or thrills, at least on the internet. Which begs the question, if a bunch of people can do this for free on their own, why hasn't Hollywood made a horror dinosaur film? Jurassic Park remains one of the most beloved films of the 90s, hell, maybe of all time. But when it was adapted from its novel by Michael Crichton, it left out many scenes that made the novel pure nightmare fuel. Truly terrifying stuff in the novel that was left on the cutting room floor because Spielberg, rightfully so, realized the film would appeal to children and he didn't want to traumatize them too much. Many people online have discussed how the original novel included scenes such as the Compsognathus's feasting on the contents of a hospital's nursery, the extra brutal way Nedry is slain, and the T-Rex river boat ride, which was later adapted into Jurassic World Rebirth. However, what a lot of people forget is that the general tone of the novel is altered fundamentally. The novel starts more as a medical thriller, understanding what these bite marks came from, seeing the remains of people who've been attacked by the dinosaurs, before transitioning into the discussion of the science itself. It's a very clinical story that never stops to have the emotive warmth Spielberg's film has. But the biggest difference is the dinosaurs. In the film, they are these wonderful creatures that are awe-inspiring, even when terrifying. The many sequences of the dinosaurs and humans interact with this air of wonder and mysticism. But in the book, there's no mysticism at all. They're demystified, as a matter of fact. The dinosaurs are always depicted as these unsettling, unpredictable creatures, monsters made in a lab. The book never settles into the miracle of their creation, but rather the horrific implications and dangers provided by them. And how the scientists fail to communicate, fail to analyze the full scope of what they're doing, and fail to look at the data in front of them and see what's going on, and how that opens them up to danger. Unfortunately, Spielberg's Jurassic Park has dominated the discussion of dinosaurs, because while the series is beloved and the original film is fantastic, all dinosaur films now need to have the element of Jurassic Park woven into them. It's altered the language of dinosaurs in cinema. And because of that, we remove the element of fear, instead focusing on the incredible, on the awesome. Before Spielberg, there were dinosaur films out there, but most were action fantasy films, or adventures, like The Valley of Gwangi, 1 million years BC, or the original The Lost World, or comedies like Caveman. Anyone else remember Caveman? But what none of these films really had were dinosaurs that were frightening. I want to talk a little bit about dinosaurs and horror, and how I feel that we've profoundly missed a chance to let dinosaurs become the next icons of terror, and how the internet has shown us how we can turn dinos into pure nightmare fuel. And at the end of this, we're going to try to take what we've learned and see if we can create a pitch for a truly disturbing dinosaur movie. Nothing we can actually make with our own money, but hey, someone creative, maybe can make it. Around the time Jurassic Park as a film was being developed, schlock icon Roger Corman purchased the filming rights to John Brosnan's Carnosaur. Carnosaur, written in 1984, years before Jurassic Park was ever written by Michael Crichton, takes place in a remote English village, where a scientist, hoping to spark a new world war, creates mutant dinosaurs from DNA fragments found in fossils mixed with chickens. Yes, we got dinosaurs made of chickens, apparently. Better than frogs, I suppose. We are gradually introduced to the carnage as the dinosaurs allowed to walk freely through the village, tear villagers apart in brutal sequences that feel more inspired by that era's slashers than science fiction. The novel focuses on the slayings committed by these beasts as they unleash hell upon everyone around them. The story is bleak, brutal, and downright disturbing at parts, focusing on carnage rather than any themes or morals. However, Corman's adaptation is, well, it was a favorite at Blockbuster when you could get it for cheap.
Corman made it for $4 million, or about what Steven Spielberg spent on frosted donuts for the crew of Jurassic Park. To see Roger Corman's dinosaurs, you have to travel to this warehouse in North Hollywood, which we did, and Corman showed off his wares. An 18-foot tall Tyrannosaurus Rex, a much smaller Tyrannosaurus Rex, a hand puppet Tyrannosaurus Rex, and a man in a Tyrannosaurus Rex suit.
Stop.
But it's not exactly a horror classic. No one's really talking about Carnosaur decades later outside of dinosaur enthusiasts. And yet, there were many changes made to the story, tons in fact, that reduced the level of terror the book provided. While the book had a number of different dinosaurs in it, the film focuses on Deinonychus, and even then, this is not exactly what Deinonychus looked like. It looks pretty bad. It's clearly a puppet, and I think Corbin understood that too.
If people had to choose this summer between seeing one dinosaur movie, much as I'm proud of Carnosaur, I would probably recommend Jurassic Park, but I think we can agree that I would hope that people would see two dinosaur movies this summer. As a matter of fact, it would make a very interesting comparison.
As opposed to the effects that designed by Stan Winston for Jurassic Park, Carnosaur looks cheap. Again, it's a Corman film, what do you expect? The problem is with dinosaur films is that they're expensive by their very nature. And so, in order to justify spending that much money, you need to reach a wider audience. And how do you get that audience? A disturbing horror film or an action film, an adventure film? Something that the whole family can enjoy. A disturbing film just won't cut it. Outside of Taming the T-Rex, there weren't too many that were too disturbing. The show Dinosaur, for example, was a family-friendly comedy. Yeah, sure, it ends with the world ending, but it was still fun. There were a lot of documentaries that came out that were educational and informative. Walking with Dinosaurs might be the most expensive nature documentary ever made, and it was incredible, capturing these depictions of dinosaurs by incorporating both special effects and advanced puppetry, the same techniques used for Jurassic Park. However, while I was growing up, there was another documentary that I would watch a ton. I'd borrow the VHS from the library and wear it thin. It was a documentary called Dinosaur. I know, original name. It featured Christopher Reeve discussing fairly outdated ideas in paleontology to young audiences. And while it is dated and a relic of its time, it's definitely worth revisiting even today because of these stop-motion sequences depicting recreations of dinosaurs. Those special effects were incredible and have a very interesting tie directly with Jurassic Park. And I think do a great job of showing just how scary you could make dinosaurs even for all audiences. Because these are some of the best I've ever seen. And these effects all came from a man named Phil Tippett. Phil Tippett is a stop-motion effects legend who worked on Star Wars and many other projects. His magnum opus, Mad God, is one of the most disturbing stop-motion films you will ever see. However, his work on the short film Prehistoric Beast became the basis for the work he'd do in Dinosaur, with essentially the whole short film playing as a segment in the documentary. And this is deeply dark stuff for family entertainment. The sequences feature those heavy shadows, low angles. Tippett never forgets how to frame the carnivorous dinosaurs as dangerous, and the vulnerable ones as small in comparison. Never forgets to show the gruesome details and when to cut away. The scenes are thrilling, even today, and without mercy. Tippett would use his skills of stop motion at first for Jurassic Park. He was tasked with bringing the dinosaurs to life for the full body shots of the film, prior to Spielberg turning to CG to do that. You see, Spielberg had a combination of animatronics and puppetry for the close-up shots of dinos and used CG for the far-off shots. Originally, he was going to use stop motion, but he didn't like how jerky it looked and instead turns to advanced technology. But Tippet stayed on, developing animatics for the film that would use as guidelines for the CG, examining how dinosaurs might move realistically, and that helped with the CG process. It helped them have a physical thing to look at to guide the abstract computers to do the job for them. It's a great fusion of technology and practical skill that we see far less of in Hollywood today. But it's here I want to take a step back for a second and look at a few things that we have seen in these early days of dinosaur cinema, at least early 90s dinosaur cinema. What made dinosaurs frightening? Well, you linger on the dinosaurs as animals that can kill you, the danger of them. There's a lack of warmth and a focus on cold carnage in the more horrific dinosaur works. There's a lot of medical scenes where they examine the carnage after the fact. And of course, the brutality of these creatures and what it does to the human body. But what's the part that's scary about Jurassic Park? Because it is still scary. Well, I feel everyone can agree the first film is the scariest. But if you had to pick what was the scariest scene, there's a few contenders. There's that first T-Rex shot where the characters are stuck in their cars and can't leave without the T-Rex attacking them, while the T-Rex roams around the cars. There's the power generator scene where Dr. Sadler's trapped in close confines with a velociraptor chasing her. But I think a lot of people point to the scene where the kids are in the kitchen and the velociraptors sneak in. Close quarters, stuck. What do they have in common? Claustrophobia, defenselessness, a lack of weapons available. The kitchen scene in Jurassic Park is actually very similar to a different scene in a very different horror film that Stan Winston worked on, Aliens. There's a scene in Aliens where Ellen Ripley and Newt are trapped in a lab with two facehuggers, set on them by that jackass Burke so he can stow away a xenomorph sample for Weyland-Yutani. And the scenes both involve a highly dangerous creature with unarmed protagonists in a vulnerable, tight space where they need to use the tools around them to survive. Simple, effective set pieces. But a lot of these movies use the scale of the dinosaurs to make you feel vulnerable, especially if there's nowhere you can hide. Unfortunately though, a lot of films just stop at scale and don't consider the set as a means of terror. A lot of games brought dinosaurs back in a really good way because they were able to use dinosaurs as easy enemies. A ton of Jurassic Park games bored their way onto arcades and traumatized a lot of kids due entirely to those pixelated T-Rexes crashing forward, jaws outstretched, with only your light gun to defend you, and it never seemed like enough ammunition would stop these things. You felt vulnerable. But I think chief among them, aside from Turok and all that, would be Dino Crisis, Capcom's follow-up to Resident Evil, switching out the zombies for raptors. Dino Crisis primarily takes place in scientific institutions and laboratories, tight corridors, fenced-in locations, where you feel trapped in very small confines with a dinosaur at the other end. You have limited ammunition. You were encumbered by the controls sometimes, trying to wrestle with them, especially nowadays with the controls are pretty dated. There were sometimes restrictive camera angles, and you didn't really have enough ammunition to fight off every dinosaur you encountered, so you had to kind of think strategically. When did you run? When did you fight? Because if you fight too much too soon, you might be left defenseless when stronger enemies arrive. And that always left you with a sense of terror. Could you escape? Could you run? Or could you fight it off? You might run out of ammunition before you had to fight. It's the same strategy in games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Unfortunately, unlike those games, Dino Crisis after the third game ran out of steam. The sales weren't coming in, and the franchise was put on ice for a very long time. It's tragedy, but what are you going to do? But the key elements that Dino Crisis brought have influenced gamers ever since, and game designers ever since. Claustrophobia and powerlessness. If you feel powerless while playing against these characters, and you feel trapped, that translates to tension and terror. But after that first Dino Crisis game, I think the steam ran out of the engine. The genre sort of died away. Maybe it's something to do with that T-Rex movie Whoopi Goldberg was in. I don't know. But we got some good documentaries, but the cinema kind of the money wasn't coming in from movies. I think the last big hurrah was really Jurassic Park 3, which itself was a cheap imitation of what came before. It is definitely a roller coaster ride, there's just not a lot to it. But that Spinosaurus bit is really cool, isn't it? I do love the Spinosaurus in that. It's funny in hindsight, that was considered for a while the worst Jurassic Park film, and in hindsight, especially on TikTok I've seen this, a lot of people defending Jurassic Park 3, which, I mean, I kind of am too. It is superficial and it's dumb, but I kind of love it. But Spinosaurus wasn't the only carnivorous dinosaur to have a resurgence at this time. I'm not the biggest fan of Disney's Dinosaur. I think it's one of their worst films of the last 30 years, but the Carnotaurus are among the most frightening dinosaurs ever put to film. The Carnotaurus was presented in the original Jurassic Park novel as well, where Michael Crichton presents them as these almost chameleon-like creatures, able to change color and blend into their surroundings, which, I mean, invisible dinosaurs sounds pretty terrifying to me. Not sure why it took so long in the films to get adapted and why they still have never really gotten the camouflage element of it quite right, but I digress. But the film Dinosaur would fall into obscurity if not for Animal Kingdom's soon-to-be closed Dinosaur Ride, where we as the audience are taken back in time, brought to capture an iguanodon for a scientific investigative group.
Now, here's the drill. You follow the homing signal to the iguanodon, then I'll enlarge the transport field, and boom, you're back with one additional passenger extra large. And don't worry about that asteroid. You'll be in and out of there before it even breaks the atmosphere. Trust me, what could go wrong?
It's all fun and cheesy, but in this dark, chaotic ride, you realize you're being pursued by a Carnotaurus, and it's a pretty cool event. Sadly, you probably can't experience this for too much longer, but the Carnotaurus jumping out at you remains one of those moments that's impressive, thrilling, and a whole lot of fun. And it's certainly cemented in a lot of kids' brains, Carnotaurus as something to be terrified of. And in the darkness, you really do feel vulnerable, even though you're on a set of tracks. But so far we have some structure, right? Dinosaurs coming out of a lab, dinosaurs being brought back to life, us going back in time to see dinosaurs, and dinosaurs in their era reigning supreme. Key elements and plots that we see time and time again in ways to get us interacting with these great creatures. Now we cut to 2015. Jurassic World kicks off a new series of films, a reboot of Jurassic Park essentially, that reinvigorates life into it, but takes a more corporate perspective of it. How will corporations keep interest in these worlds without developing new dinosaurs, making new monsters for us? And it always emphasizes that what we saw before is old hat. We gotta reinvent ourselves, the new era. And I think, unfortunately, that mindset did take us away from the fear dinosaurs still posed. And judging by how many online shorts are made based on the Jurassic Park era, I think there's still a lot of stories to tell from Jurassic Park, with just the dinos we got there. I suppose this new generation of corporate stuff, corporate slop. And I think as time went on, the dinosaurs became far less powerful, far less intimidating. There was always a super dino in every film, and that was the big bad. But the rest of them kind of felt unimpressive by comparison. A lot of people criticize Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, but it does a lot of the things we've been talking about here. The other two Jurassic World films have these wide open spaces. Set pieces are positioned in open fields, large forests, and the sense of claustrophobia is never relevant. Further, all the characters feel powerful. Chris Pratt can go through these huge sequences and never get a scratch on him. The scariest scene in Jurassic World Dominion is one where he's not present, where Claire is at the mercy of the blind, plant-eating Therizinosaurus, defending its territory. It's a scene where a character is vulnerable, unarmed, and stuck in a tight, claustrophobic area. But Fallen Kingdom, save for the chase scene on the island as the volcano erupts, all of the sequences are claustrophobic, tight, in hallways and corridors. The entire scene with the Indoraptor chasing the heroes in a mansion, pursuing a small girl in her bedroom, all of them are claustrophobic. Ignore the fact that the film's plot is almost entirely nonsensical for a second, and ridiculous. The filmmaker understands horror, which when you realize the filmmaker made The Orphanage, that makes sense, doesn't it? I'm glad to say parts of Jurassic World Rebirth did something similar. But is it enough? Well, I'd say no. Because it draws back on one of the most compelling ideas Fallen Kingdom put out there, that Dominion also walked back. Dinosaurs in normal parts of our society. That's a concept I just love. Most dinosaur films contain the dinos to very specific locations. A small island, a small town, a facility. But Fallen Kingdom ends with the prospect of dinos everywhere, invading the entire world, spreading out. Dinos in the Arctic, dinos in the tundra, dinos in the rainforest, dinos in small town America, on the ranch. But the problem is Dominion and Rebirth limit these ideas. They don't want to show the full implications because that might be too chaotic. Instead, dinos become a general nuisance, or as incapable of surviving outside the particular ecosystems. They don't show us the impact these dinosaurs even dying have on regular society. What kind of bacterial infections can spread when a dino just drops dead in the middle of a field? When a blue whale rots, it causes problems on a beach. What would a Stegosaurus rotting cause in a small town, ill-equipped to remove it? Hell, Dominion's more focused on the locust subplot than the dinosaurs. And most of the dinosaur scenes in Dominion feel utterly toothless, especially with the Giganotosaurus. At least Rebirth had scary dino scenes, like the riverboat scene with the T-Rex and the mutant dinosaur jamboree in the finale. Oh, and the scientifically accurate Spinosaurus? Really like those. That's cool. More Spinosaurus, please, in our films. I love Spinosaurus. I just think I'm just a fan. I'm just an enthusiast. But let's look at the two most noteworthy dinosaur films outside Jurassic World that have come out the last 10 years that I think illustrate the problems that we have with these films. 65 and Primitive War. 65 is a story about humanoid aliens crash landing on Earth during the Cretaceous period, struggling to survive as dinosaurs press in on all sides. Primitive War, meanwhile, is a story about Vietnam War soldiers stumbling on a cove of various dinosaurs brought back from the past thanks to a Soviet Union experiment with wormhole technology. Look, maybe Carnosaur was onto something when they just said it was made by chickens, even though that was pretty dumb. But come on. Both films were criticized for being kind of schlocky and of poor quality. They were both criticized broadly for being pretty dumb. Characterization is undermined, especially in Primitive War, which, much like Carnosaur, is based on the book, and the book's really good. Mind you, the book is more focused on the Vietnam soldiers' trauma and experiences. But while both are basically edgier versions of Jurassic Park on some level, they're not scarier than it. Rather, they're focused on men fighting dinosaurs with artillery meant to be intense, a military-grade arsenal or a science fiction-grade arsenal. And very rarely as a result do we think these men are in any trouble. You can shoot down a T-Rex just fine with these weapons. It brings down the dinos rather than brings them up. To bring aliens back into discussion, even though you have space marines in Aliens, with all their weapons they still feel powerless because you watch their arsenal dwindle down, you watch as they're picked off one by one, and you get the sense that no matter how strong they are, it's only a matter of time before they stumble and fail. And indeed, they do. You never get a sense that they can escape in one piece. Unfortunately, in both 65 and Primitive War, you never don't feel like they'll escape in one piece and be just fine. At no point does Vulture Squad for Primitive War feel helpless, nor does Kylo Ren himself ever break a sweat fighting dinosaurs. And it's the same problem that Dominion had too, where Chris Pratt's a Mary Sue, unstoppable. If you make your character too strong, the threat level of your work is undermined. But there is one story I neglected to mention that is actually pretty good. Primal. Primal is an Adult Swim cartoon made by Genndy Tartakovsky, the same guy who made Samurai Jack. It's raw visual storytelling. It's ahistorical, sure. It has cavemen and dinosaurs living at the same time, like 1 million years BC. However, there's an added element here that adds to the story, I think. This is a concept that was introduced briefly in Michael Crichton's sequel to Jurassic Park, The Lost World. Not the film version, but the book version. What happens when a dinosaur gets sick? And not just sick, but something that poisons the brain itself. What if dinosaurs go rabid, go out of control? And without guns and modern equipment, how do you stop them? In Primal, that's the case, with a zombie dinosaur plague that drives dinos into a bloodthirsty carnage spill. But further, there's also the online world of analog horror and homemade horror in Blender, often taking imagery from Jurassic Park to make some truly nightmarish stuff. Mostly, it's focused on workers at the park, being put in dangerous situations, or the dinosaurs wandering into public areas. Do you notice what's missing? weapons, ammunition, means of fighting back. Everyone is taken off guard, trapped in claustrophobic halls, sometimes sterile halls, or aware that the safety of their own homes offer them nothing. Many of these have an analog horror / found footage quality to further emphasize just how real, and thus just how powerless, we are. It makes the perspective we have of the dinosaurs feel smaller because the scale is larger. We're looking up at them rather than looking at them from some helicopter camera level to the dinosaur's eye level. This is something Rebirth also capitalized on, making dinosaurs feel gargantuan. I see the online films as a reaction to the action blockbusters, the expensive blockbusters, and most of these are made in Blender for free, using public assets. Or they're analog films using nothing more than the implications of monsters rather than the presentation of them. But I also feel beyond that, there's a sign here. People don't want their giant action films all the time. I mean, some are great. I love action films. Love Jurassic Park and Jurassic World, great series. But sometimes you need to go back to what Carnosaur did. Make dinosaurs into Jason Voorhees, into Freddy Krueger, into slasher villains who prey on innocent people and tear their lives apart. Arachnophobia, in many ways, is more akin to what these people want to see than another action blockbuster. And it's funny because Spielberg had a hand in that film too. So from here, we're going to move into the pitch phase. I'm going to tell you what I think I'd like to see done in a dinosaur horror story. We're going to briefly pitch an idea to the world. Maybe if you're watching, you might be a filmmaker yourself. In which case, credit me for it. But I want to ask a few questions before we pitch this. Where will the story take place? What kind of characters will we be seeing? And how intense should it be? Well, for the last one, very. This is going to be a bleak story. Setting and characters, I want to emphasize that we need people who aren't soldiers. Don't even know if they can use guns, maybe. They shouldn't be scientists. They shouldn't be anyone who knows what's really going on. I've always been a fan of these kinds of movies, like Tremors or, again, Arachnophobia, where average people who have some knowledge of what's going on, but not a whole ton, get stuck in a situation that's beyond their control. Something extreme, where nature overwhelms them. They're not prepared to deal with the obstacle at hand. Average people living average lives. Maybe the suburbs, maybe a rural America, somewhere where they aren't exactly equipped to stop it. The only exception should be a Burt Gunner-esque character, someone with a huge arsenal of weapons in their basement who's been prepping for doomsday for years. This character, however, will not be a protagonist, but rather someone who they come into conflict with. We'll get there. I also think there should be some lab or medical facility in the area that's responsible for what's going on. But I think we should never learn why the dinosaurs are there. I think it's unnecessary. Some people insist on explanations for everything, but think about this. Hitchcock never explained why the birds attack the birds. Romero never explained why the zombies rise from the grave. Why should we have to explain why dinosaurs are here if the focus is not on explanations and science going amok, but rather survival? You look at Primitive War, the revelation it's a warp machine bringing the dinosaurs back from the Soviet Union, it undermines the concept. Unless your film's about playing God or playing with science like Jurassic World and Jurassic Park are, it's not necessary. If you're not going to make a story about creating dinosaurs, it's not important why they're there. Carnosaur, I think, is weakened when you learn that all the dinosaurs come from chickens, and by a scientist who wants to start World War III or whatever. It's the underwhelming part, and we don't really need to know, because the characters might never know. Isn't it more frightening to see something you can't explain, can't justify, can't understand? I think so. Focus on the carnage, focus on the idea of survival, and give implications as to what happened through set design. Don't tell us exactly what happened. Have us go to the lab at some point and see technology that the characters don't understand and can't use. That you can just assume this is how dinosaurs got here. We don't need to know specifics, we just need to see implication. And that's more frightening, especially if, when they find the lab, the dinosaurs have left no one to talk. I think our film should also draw from Alien. Keep the dinosaurs hidden in the shadows until they spring. There should be a way of knowing they're around. Maybe there's a clicking sound or a little guttural noise. Maybe in the pipes, the echo. Maybe they're over in the ceiling crawling above you. Maybe they're in the shadows in different hallways. But it should be still and it should be tense until they strike. Don't forget, it's not always important to have everything in motion. Sometimes stillness speaks volumes. Silence speaks volumes. The hint of something off and then nothing else but that one singular hint. waiting, waiting, waiting until, around the bend, it comes. I also think if you have raptors, they should be more equipped to use human beings as traps. Maybe have a person lingering in a room and have them cry out in terror, and someone going to reach them only to find a raptor standing over him with a claw on his back. This technique was also done in those animated shorts I was talking about online. But then, what kind of dinosaurs should we have? Well, I think taking a page out of Primal and the original Lost Worlds book is in order. Make the dinosaurs rabid. These dinosaurs are exposed to viruses that their body's not equipped to deal with. So, rabies. Why not? What would be more frightening? An intelligent raptor? That's scary, but we've seen it before. Or a rabid triceratops, lingering around and lumbering, ramming into buildings in a chaotic rage, its victims harpooned in its horns, decaying and rotting as smaller dinosaurs pick away at the flesh and carrion, ramming through cars, ramming through street signs, ramming through storefronts, unable to control itself, and we're left in terror watching. I think it's also a missed opportunity to not have plant-eating dinosaurs be terrifying. Don't forget Scary Scene Dominion, it was a plant-eating dinosaur. We focus on T-Rexes and raptors so often, but Stegosauruses, Triceratops, Ankylosaurs, they're all incredibly dangerous animals. The original Lost World, the 1920s film, ends with a Brontosaurus rumbling through the streets of London, knocking down buildings and what have you. Imagine a rabid Triceratops, a rabid Ankylosaur, a rabid Stegosaurus. A lot of set pieces can be done with that, especially if you're trapped in a car. I think also a good example might be Cujo to watch. Cujo is a film about a mother and her child trapped in a car as a rabid St. Bernard tries getting in. Imagine what you can do with a rabid Ankylosaur trying to smash a car that they're stuck inside of. As for the plot, well, just make it about survival and the paranoia of survival. I think The Mist is a good example of what to draw from. Have a cast of characters who are huge and diverse and interesting, and stick them in one location, possibly one connected to the lab in some way. And the characters are trying to survive, set up strategies, set up escape routes, but their own paranoia turns them against each other. And once they're turned against each other, the monsters outside can come in, especially if you have an intelligent animal like a raptor who understands his paranoia and tries to exploit it for prey. Something intelligent and dangerous. The divide should be between the normal people and that Burt Gunner type character, the only one with any actual real weaponry, who uses most of his ammunition very early on in the movie, but insists he knows what he's doing with limited supplies. I think he should go out in a blaze of glory at the start of the third act against something like an Ankylosaur, something impenetrable that all of his weaponry can't stop. The message should be, it's useless to fight these things, it's far more efficient to escape. I think in terms of weaponry, it should be very limited. It should be only maybe a couple guns, but very limited ammunition. Most weapons should be around the house kind of stuff. Maybe they find a landscaper who has some landscaping equipment like clippers or hedge trimmers or weed whackers or a lawnmower to use. Maybe a pickup truck has to kind of ram through a dinosaur to get past it. Every encounter with a dinosaur should end in either a fatality or debilitating injury, one that festers, one that incapacitates the main character in some way. It's important also to consider the set around each dinosaur encounter. There should be a Spinosaurus encounter, for example, around a pond or lake where the Spinosaurus is lurking like a crocodile nearby it, dragging cars into its depths to drown all the passengers. There should be some dark, massive basement where a Carnotaurus is hiding. Potentially can have that chameleon element from the original Michael Crichton books of Jurassic Park incorporated somewhere in there. And of course, there should be a scene in a lab filled with velociraptors. And of course, the exterior scenes in the town should be rabid vegetarian dinosaurs like Triceratops, Ankylosaurs, or Stegosauruses, running amok and slamming into its surroundings. And yes, disturbingly, we should have a scene in a hospital filled with Compsognathuses feasting and picking away at patients left sedated, or patients too vulnerable to ever resist. Oh, and one more thing. The T-Rex should only appear at the very end. Every other Jurassic Park and Jurassic World movie ends with a big fight with the monster at the end, the big bad dino. This gets to a ridiculous degree in the later Jurassic World movies, where it's a genetically altered dino, but I digress. But there's one I like to point out here. Jurassic World Rebirth ends with the heroes confronting the D-Rex, a grotesquely mutated Tyrannosaurus hybrid. And the characters don't kill it. They can't kill it. It's just too powerful, too indestructible. It's a force of nature. That should be the model to draw from. Not a character you can fight, but a character you can only run away from. And anyone who attempts to fight it ends up dying. A T-Rex should be like that. At this point, ammunition should be exhausted, their arsenal depleted, and all they're left with are a couple escape routes. And every one they try ends up being countered by the T-Rex. Take a car, take a truck out of there, the T-Rex crushes it or chases up to it, or rips the bumper off and leaves it spiraling into a storefront. They try to get the attention of a helicopter passing by. As the helicopter comes down, the T-Rex bites, takes a hold of it and rams it into a storefront, or the street in some way. Everything they do should be countered by this colossal creature. It should feel like they can't stop it, and ultimately, I think they shouldn't. If we pitch a film, the big thing I want is to end on the bleakest note possible. One that's completely and utterly hopeless and filled with despair. Because that is what we need in a genre that's become too complacent, too conforming to a certain formula. Something truly revolutionary should be horror, plain and simple. The kind you can't walk away from. Very few studios will be willing to do that, but I think it might be fun for someone, maybe a smaller production, maybe one of these Blender guys, to try it out. I don't know. Could be neat. Whatever the case may be, we need to bring horror back to this genre.
Computer, now what?
Carnotaurus.
That's it! Abort mission! Abort! Abort!
Iguanodon.
Get it! Get